Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting. Thank you for joining us, all of you online, and those of you who've joined the meeting as members, as participants on Zoom. I'll now introduce to you the leader of the Workers' Party, George Galloway.
Thank you, Rob. Greetings to the comrades in the Workers' Party of Britain who will be asking questions rather sooner than usual. I'm rather talked out today. I literally have been talking on Zoom all day. So I'll be a little shorter than usual. And welcome also to the members of the public that haven't joined us yet, who are watching online, either live or later. It's been an American day, of course. An American idiot left town and another American idiot moved in. It's all over, as I've just been saying, bar the shelling. The shelling will, of course, continue, but the American bombers will now have the rainbow flag painted on their tail fins, and everyone bombed will be addressed in the proper pronouns according to how they have asked to be defined. The ending of Donald Trump's presidency, rather like the 4 years of it, actually, flattering only to deceive. He had allowed us to hope that he might pardon Julian Assange, but he pardoned the swamp instead. He didn't pardon the man that unmasked the war crimes and crimes against humanity in America's wars. He pardoned the murderers and killers of the mercenaries and others who had actually carried out the atrocities, the crimes against humanity. He pardoned the swamp, having greatly expanded the swamp, actually. And just as he let down the American workers, whose jobs he promised to bring back to the United States, but didn't, just as he had promised the soldiers that America would be ending its endless foreign wars, he failed on that one too. Some soldiers have come back from some of the theaters of war, but others have been sent in massive numbers to the Persian Gulf, for example, or off the coast and in the neighboring countries of Venezuela. So maybe some soldiers left Afghanistan, but the soldiers didn't leave Syria. And in any case, they went only to new potential theaters of war. And Donald Trump's supporters like to say that he didn't start any new wars, but of course, he kept the existing wars burning rather fiercely. And so the man was a deceiver in the end. And he had a huge mass popular base to actually change things in the United States, but he failed to do so. He was a gross and ugly American for sure, but 50, 60, 70, maybe 75 million Americans who voted for him are nonetheless people who want change in America. They might not want the change we want, but they certainly reject the status quo in the United States. And if ever a government looked like a status quo anti-government, it's the Joe Biden government. It looked like the address book of Jeffrey Epstein come back to life as they all roamed around their familiar corridors of power. The people who have presided over the deindustrialization of the United States, presided over war after war after war, and crime after crime after crime all over the world are back in town, back in Pennsylvania Avenue, back in the White House, back in the CIA, back in the State Department, back in the Pentagon. So just resist all this liberal guff that is spewing out of the British media this evening about that comfortable old sweater, Joe Biden. still more the liberal guff about the first woman vice president of the United States. I grew out of that kind of identity politics nonsense when the first woman became the Prime Minister of Britain, Margaret Thatcher. And if there ever was an idea that women would be a kinder and gentler political class, it died, I'm afraid, with the premiership of Margaret Thatcher. Kamala Harris is a very dangerous individual, the more dangerous because of the free pass that she has been given by the liberal elite and by the commentariat and by the useful idiots who think that having someone of color, having someone of the female sex in power is somehow necessarily a good thing. Just resist it is what I'm saying. We opposed Donald Trump and we oppose Joe Biden because both of them were just different cheeks of the same backside. And that backside is American imperialism and late stage American capitalism, which will more and more nakedly be the imperialist face. The Biden administration has set its face resolutely against Russia and China and will confront Russia and China at every turn. They will confront these two countries economically through sanctions, and they have no intention of ending the sanctions against Russia. In fact, the Biden administration will push forward last-minute sanctions from President Trump that actually might make the Nord Stream 2 pipeline inoperative, might stop it in its tracks just a few miles short of its destination of linking Russia to Germany for the supply of natural gas. The sanctions against Russia will find new reasons, of course. Navalny, the ultra-right-wing nationalist, racist, who unaccountably, you might think, seems to have the support of every liberal and every anti-racist, achingly political correct element in the Western media. If Navalny was operating in Britain, he would be to the right of UKIP, might even be in the BNP, an Islamophobe, a racist, a nationalist, a self-declared white Russian nationalist who doesn't like the fact that so many people from the former Soviet Union are living and working and prospering in Russia. Yet, because he's against President Putin, Navalny has been adopted by the Washington Post and by the Guardian and by the BBC, and he has been weaponized. And of course, he will not bring down the government in Moscow. Of course, he will not materially damage the Russian Federation, but he will be used as a spear, as a cat's paw to provoke new and ever wider, deeper sanctions. Ditto the confrontation with China. The foreign policy of Joe Biden will be no different to the foreign policy of Donald Trump in relation to China. In fact, it might very well be about to get worse because there are signs that the nationalist government in Taiwan may be preparing after 72 years to declare itself an independent state. And as most of you will know, the pretense in Taiwan has always been that they are China and that the rest of mainland China is merely temporarily in the grip of the Communist Party of China and in the People's Republic of China, but that one day the Taiwanese will reunite the country on their terms. China has, for 72 years, forsworn any attack on Taiwan, any attempt to forcibly reintegrate it with the country, hoping for a long time that it would be a solution like the Hong Kong one with one country, two systems. But that hasn't worked out too well in Hong Kong. And the chances of it working out better in Taiwan are not very high. And so if the Taiwan government were to be so foolish as to declare themselves independent from China, that could provoke an international conflict. And the Joe Biden administration will be just as nakedly imperialistic in relation to that as the Donald Trump administration was. The one, you might say, ray of hope on the horizon is that Joe Biden wants to re-enter the Iran nuclear deal, the withdrawal from which has caused so much pain and suffering in Iran. But it's not going to be easy for President Biden to do that on two grounds. First of all, the Democrats control the Senate, but only on the casting vote of Kamala Harris. And any treaty has to be endorsed by the Senate. So all it would need was some right-wing rogue Democratic senator to decline to rejoin the JCPOA, and that could be scuppered. But the bigger reason why this might not happen is that the Biden administration is intending to insist on changes to the Iran nuclear deal before America will return to it. And those changes, the two most significant of which, require substantial disarmament by the Islamic Republic of Iran, perfectly legal arms, arms prohibited or precluded by no international law, but are the right of any sovereign country to have a ballistic missile capability to defend itself from countries that are viscerally hostile to it all around them. The Iranians will not do that. You can bank that. The Iranians will never agree to disarm themselves because they saw what happened to Iraq when Iraq volunteered to disarm itself. And the second caveat, if you like, or change that the Biden administration is committed to in the JCPOA is an end to Iran's regional role, by which they mean Iranian influence in Iraq, in Syria, and in Lebanon. And again, there is absolutely no prospect of the Islamic Republic of Iran becoming a kind of hermit and drawing in the enormous soft power, religious power, ideological power that they have in the crescent which stretches from the Gulf to the Mediterranean. So if Joe Biden puts these two conditions on the table as the price of America returning to the nuclear deal, then those conditions will be rejected. And therefore, America will still be in effectively a state of war with Iran. So there's no, I mean, Joe Biden's already told you himself that nothing much is going to change. I'm not making that up. That was one of his election pledges. If you elect me, nothing much will change. And he was telling the truth about that. There is going to be no change in the balance of wealth and power inside the United States. The oligarchy, which became fantastically richer in the period of Donald Trump, through the period of the coronavirus pandemic, will become no poorer at all under Joe Biden. And the poor and the working masses, including scores of millions of unemployed people in America, can look forward to, well, in Joe Biden's own words, not much change at all. So there's trouble at mill. The Trumpites are nursing their wrath to keep it warm, and it will emerge in due course in various forms, either as a new political party, a MAGA party, or a patriot party, in new television stations, new social media platforms, and so on. Trump got 75 million votes, maybe 50 million of that 75 are his votes rather than votes for the Republican Party. And if we had an army of 50 million people, you could be sure we'd be doing something with it. And I think it's fair to assume that Donald Trump will also. Just a few words now about our own domestic situation. When I addressed you last Wednesday, it was on the occasion of the worst death toll in the coronavirus pandemic, more than 1,500 people dead. Well, today, more than 1,600 people dead. The vaccination rollout, which had been going well, far better than Europe, and I acknowledged that last week, has begun to fall like a stone, is down about 25% on Friday to Monday. And if that fall continues, then serious questions will be being asked, not alas in Parliament by the opposition, because they've already pledged their support to Boris Johnson. But in the country, people will know that their grandmother hasn't had a jab yet. Their elderly mother, father has not had the vaccination yet. People in their 60s, like me, are already asking, when might we get a vaccination? People in their 50s on the current rate will not get the vaccination until next autumn, which means, of course, that all these lockdowns and closures with the mass inactivity and unemployment that they have created will deepen and worsen. So we're not in any way out of the woods in terms of the coronavirus pandemic and the political price that will be paid by the government for that, by both governments here and in Edinburgh and in Wales for that matter, where the crackdown, lockdown has been most severe. An all-party group of idiots were caught having a drinks party in the bar of the Welsh Senate yesterday. Popular anger is undoubtedly growing, but it will grow exponentially if there are major problems with this vaccine, either in its efficacy, and there are some questions now emerging about that, or in the rate of the rollout and the perceived fairness of the rollout. In Scotland, the situation is worse, far worse. We are about a third behind the English rollout, and that's already costing the SNP minority government political support in the country. I'm going to stop there and give you plenty of time for questions. Rob, thanks for organizing this, and thanks to the members for coming along to this meeting.
Thanks very much, George. That was a really useful range of topics to touch on there. I really think, the nature of the relationship between Britain and the US is something that's really worth working people comprehending and understanding that, there are the leaders and, people that, while we're told, that we should think that they represent us in some way, these people are not our representatives. That's why we're here with our own party.
Yeah.
I've got a few people who have got contributions to make. It's nice to see a mix of people that we may be familiar from our meetings last year, and also new people that have joined us since we finished that programme. I'm going to come to Cecilia first, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Hello,
great to hear
Cecilia.
you. Mr. Galloway, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Very interesting talk, informative as usual. Yeah, I briefly wanted to share something. I work for the local authority here in the county where I live. And recently we've been sent an email asking us to redeploy some of the hours that we normally work to help the public health team in the council. So yeah, I offered a few hours. So we were given this intensive training so we could start working quickly. I wasn't sure what the role was. It was something to do with COVID. That's all I knew. And so it turns out that it's to call people, basically to do this track and tracing, seeing people who got a positive test, where they've been the few couple of days before they got the symptoms, etc. So, and they were telling us, to give us context, although this is still being done centrally as a part of that very expensive, apparently like 22 billion pound central system they set up, although that's still happening, that's been failing every time more and more. So they are managing to contact fewer and fewer people. And gradually, this has been being passed to the local authorities who are picking this up now. So later I was thinking, so hang on a minute. So the local authorities have these public health teams who have all this knowledge, who that's what they do, this expertise, the specialized databases to deal with this. They know the area, so the data makes more sense to them. So why were they bypassed in the first place? Why was this other thing set up that on top of being expensive hasn't worked? So for me, the only answer is because that way they could turn it into business and give the money to their mates. And the other way, they would have had to give the money to the local governments and fund the local communities. And in doing so, not only it's all this money that's being wasted, but also people have died because of this, because of the waste of time. And all I wanted to say is this is so blatant, so callous that they need to answer at whenever it's pertinent. May not be the right moment now, but at the earliest opportunity, questions need to be raised. And I hope our party is one of the voices asking for an explanation. Why has it been, why have we been bypassed, the local communities, the ones who can do this, who are doing this already for decades and know how to do it? That was all. Thank you.
Well, that's a tremendously eloquent summary of what I think may be the biggest act of corruption ever from any British government at any time. Let me remind you that this track and trace fiasco has cost us so far almost 25 billion pounds. When we had National Health Service and local authority network, well able, better able as it turned out, exponentially better able as it turned out, to carry this out with local expertise, with people actually working in the public interest, literally so in the National Health Service and in the public local authorities. They were screamingly, obviously, the people who should have been given the job of track and trace. They knew the streets, they knew the community, they knew the people. A councillor who's worth their salt can tell you who lives where and who they live with and who their married daughters and sons are if you need to go and get them. That kind of local knowledge is, of course, of prime importance in the rollout of a scheme like this. Instead, you were bypassed, deliberately bypassed, for two reasons, actually. One, because they hate the public sector, they hate local authorities and those who work for them, they hate the National Health Service, though they can never openly admit it. They opposed it being formed. They have sought to sell it to their friends, both here and if they could have gotten away with it in the United States also. That's one reason. But the other reason is, as you rightly say, but I'll put a name on it, it's corruption. they corruptly intended to channel billions of pounds into the private sector, oftentimes to their own cronies, and sometimes, believe this or not, even to their own family members. They channeled this money as a deliberate act of corruption, which would have been a major scandal even if it had worked. The fact that it happened and it has been a catastrophic failure makes it possibly the biggest scandal of all time in modern British history. And that's saying something. And not a big scandal, I was going to say almost as big, it isn't quite, is that only you and only me are saying this. Where is the opposition in Parliament? Not just raising, if I was in Parliament, in the face of this evidence, the walls would be shaking. If we were in Parliament, the walls would be shaking. The Parliament would be disrupted. There would be nothing going on except the demand for an explanation of this scandal, this corrupt scandal, this incompetent scandal. And I can promise you, Cecilia, when the time is right, you're right, it's not right now, but when the time is right, at the earliest possible opportunity, we in the Workers' Party will do everything that we can to bring this to the public's attention and to rouse the British public to demand justice for this crime. And it is a crime because it's not just the money, is it? It's not just that they stole our money. It's that they killed our people too by their own incompetence.
Thanks very much, George and Cecilia. You know, it's a really excellent point to make and draw attention to, because you can see it. You know, these issues will happily be swept under the carpet if, you know, people don't persist in demanding that it's looked at and demanding that more people, you know, appreciate the sheer sort of scale of what it is that's been done, what's been pulled off, essentially, because there hasn't been any resistance or, you know, meaningful opposition to it, as you say. I'm going to come to Joshua next. I can see you've got your hand up there. You can unmute yourself.
Hi there, yeah. Can you hear me?
Can hear
yes,
you.
Joshua, welcome.
Yes. Okay. Just with the caveat that I don't defend and have never defended the European Union ever before, and I stand by my decision to Brexit. But there is the issue, the caveat of the Working Time Directive that is now under review. Now, I know that there are plenty of countries that are not in the EU that have more paid holidays per annum as a matter of government stature that are not in the EU than plenty of EU countries, and more than the minimum that the EU stipulates for its member states. And in fact, we've had paid holidays as a right since 1938, and ours, while we were part of the EU, the number of paid holidays you could take was actually higher than most other EU countries. So I'm not in despair, but I am nevertheless concerned. I have my trepidations about the Tories' impending review of it. Are there any reassurances or assurances you could offer to us that they won't slash them, just to make sure that we can, just to reassure also, you know, reluctant Remainers that might be listening to this online broadcast?
Well, I don't speak for the government, of course, neither am I privy to their intentions. But as you correctly identified or implied, we actually had better holidays and shorter hours before we joined the European Union than we did by the time that we left it. And even by the time that we left it, we had better holidays than many members of the EU. I no longer give much thought to reluctant Remainers because we've already left, and that's yesterday's argument. But my main point would be, we got what we got because we fought for it. We got what we got because we fought for it in trade unions, and we elected councils and parliaments that legislated for it and administered it, introduced it. And that's what we'll have to do again. Trade unions will have to get off their arse and do what a trade union is supposed to do. I could have said, in relation to Cecilia's question, where have been the local authority unions during this track and trace corruption and fiasco? Pretty damn quiet, unless I'm missing something. And ditto in relation to the question you are asking. You get the wages and conditions that you fight for and that you are prepared to defend. And if you are not prepared to fight for them, then someone will try to take them away, in which case the workers need to move aside those that will not fight for them and elect and appoint people who will. Let's take the example of the British gas engineers. The British gas engineers are currently fighting a valiant fight against the fire and rehire scam of their highly profitable employer. Not the first, not even the 10th such employer to try this scam. And the GMB, and you may have seen the young woman who speaks for them on the issue on the Mother of All talk shows last Sunday, a very fine contribution she made, as one of the engineers also did when he called into the show while she was being interviewed. That's what a union's supposed to be doing. That's the role of a trade union. And in that, I beg this question, I pose this question, again, where are the TUC in the British gas affair? Where are the other unions? Why isn't everyone coming together to say that a company which fires and rehires on inferior contracts its own loyal workforce, many of whom have worked for them for decades, is an affront to the British people in the middle of one of their greatest ever tests? We need life in Parliament on the opposition benches and life in the TUC and amongst the trade unions. That's the only way the workers' hour and pay can properly be defended.
Thanks, George. Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day, and we noted that, you just aren't seeing anything covering this dispute that's going on with British Gas. Where it's being covered has been on the material that we produced and put out on your Moat show. And it's something that we've really got to push. We can use all the things that we've got at our disposal. And I think I can get Jason on here, who has got some comments on this for us. Jason, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, hello, George, and hello, everyone. Yeah, thank you. You may have already seen it, but I did an interview in the last few days with an engineer from British Gas. And it
was brilliant. I've
you.
seen it and shared it. It was brilliant.
Thank you very much, George. I appreciate that. I'm going to lavish you with some praise now, George, because I think it's fantastic that you gave Hazel Nolan of the GMB the opportunity to speak on the Mother of All talk shows on Sunday night, because rarely in the event of a dispute like this, it's been starved of the oxygen of publicity. And admittedly, with COVID and Trump going into meltdown in the White House, seizing the agenda, it was it was a disgrace, really, that the mainstream media chose not to report more on the dispute affecting the British gas workers than they did. But thankfully, through your show and through the good work of Hazel Nolan and everyone at the GMB, this dispute has been pushed up the agenda. And I don't want to go into the details too much of the dispute itself, because George, you've already elaborated on that already. But what I will say is this is the third in a number of disputes where British Airways have done it and ASDA have done it previously, where they've pulled their existing terms, conditions, agreements, contracts, and everything else from their workers and basically said, sign this or you're out. And I don't think, and I fear, that this British gas dispute won't be the last either. And on behalf of everyone in the trade union group of the Workers' Party, and I'm sure on behalf of everyone who's on this call now and who will watch this video in future, we stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in British Gas in their dispute. Thank you, George.
Thank you. I couldn't put it better than that. And your interview with the British gas worker was exemplary. We should all be doing that. We have to turn ourselves into video makers, citizen journalists. We have to seek out local issues, seek out national issues that are being ignored by others. That's what I did with the Hazel Nolan interview. I saw that this dispute was happening, and I saw that nobody else was covering it. And so we covered it, and we have vastly inflated the number of people who know about it by so doing, and rallied behind the trade union. The GMB deserves congratulations for the spirit with which and the flair with which their social media work has been really good in a way that most unions is just not. And heaven knows they spend enough money on their media departments. They've got a lot of people sitting around in their head offices, sometimes not doing all that much productively. They too need to, the unions need to tool themselves, arm themselves with social media abilities and equipment and so on. It doesn't take much. We're speaking now on Zoom. Everyone can do it. And that's the way we're going to build our strength and eventually win.
Thanks very much, George. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I think the way that we've built something where we do have a certain amount of media at our disposal that we can use, we've got to understand that, plugging away in this kind of way with these things, it can amount to, pressure being put on that does, actually change the outcome of things. You feel, that you're aware that there's a certain kind of tipping point that it's not completely out of reach to us. And, there's so many people that have, just kind of come to accept that you can't influence and you can't change things. And, because we've been taught to be, viewing ourselves as just an individual with, only able to defend our own interests. But, I think the work that we've been doing as we've developed as a party, building up groups that have got focus on, different types of work that we need to engage in, it's really been a good testament to what you can achieve with some collective input and, a bit of discipline. It's not just the case of, that when you talk about people power, that it's just people going out on a Saturday to, show their support for something. Obviously, those kind of actions and things can be, very useful and good rallying points. But actually, the persistent chipping away, sharing things through social media, having an actual structured way of trying to promote things and spread the message, in front of a broader audience. It's something that we I think we're on the right track with where we're going with it, and it's really good to see that the input is coming from people that are engaging in these things, and hopefully being able to bring more people towards this kind of work that we're doing. I've got a message that's been sent in from one of our members down in the southwest region, and she's made a couple of points here about, as being a mother who's in the past had to use benefits, and this is obviously something that she's got a personal experience of, and she thinks that as a party we should be shouting louder and louder regards food provisions for families, and we need to be supporting those key workers that are very low down on the list for vaccine. They're low paid, but they're high risk. She also goes on to say that she does feel that there is a vacuum being built. Groups from the far right will cling on to. There's people in poverty here in this country working who will want something or someone to blame. And if there's no one shouting for them, a bit like in America, we do have the risk of rising far right power here. So she says, as an old Labour member, even from her background, Labour have been appalling on this front, and the narrative has been too. So thanks for that, Emma.
Well, look, first I need to put some perspective on this, and I have been active doing so this week on social media. It is first and foremost important to acknowledge that far-right activity, physical force, far-right activity is a clear and present danger in our country, a former imperialist country, still an imperialist country, but formerly with a very big empire, and now not. And a country where things are going badly wrong. The danger of physical force, far-right activity is clear, and it's present, and we need to be cognizant of it. But we should also not fall for the anti-Brexit rhetoric, which paints the British people as somehow a swamp of people that are just waiting to get their hands on foreigners and immigrants and so on. As a matter of fact, Britain is the only country in the entire continent of Europe which does not have any elected far-right official at any level in any parliament, council, or local assembly. That is a great tribute to the British people. It shows that, well, uniquely for now, we see them. We see fascism. We know what fascism is. We have some history in that regard. So whilst I'm for vigilance and mobilization against far-right activity, particularly where it's intended to intimidate the Jewish community in Stamford Hill or Muslim communities in parts of the Midlands and so on, I'm fully in favor of that. And we in the party keep our eye on these organizations and will be there and ready to stand up for anyone victimized by such organizations. It's important not to imagine that they're on the rise. They are not on the rise. They could get on the rise if there's no alternative being put by a proper opposition here in this country, but they are not at this point in time on the rise, unlike countries like France, like Germany, like the Netherlands, like Denmark, and Sweden, and many other places. So I just ask to keep that in perspective, Rob. Secondly, the issue of low-paid essential workers is a lesson from which we certainly intend to draw to the public's attention. It turned out in the last 12 months that the people we depend on the most are the people who are paid the least and whose status is given the least, whose worth is least acknowledged in the media narrative and amongst the political class and so on. If we had no truck drivers moving food around the country, we'd have nothing to eat. If we had no shop workers risking their lives all day on the aisles, on the checkout, doing the cleaning and so on, then we would not be able to, as we still can, at least find food in these places. If we did not have, with all respect to the surgeons and the doctors and even the nurses, if we did not have the other workers in the health service who are far less often eulogized. Nobody claps for the cleaner in the hospital. Nobody claps for the dinner lady in the school and so on. This period has shown that these are the people on whom society depends and turns. And those that are paid the most and who fill the prints with their the gossip about their lives and so on, we can well do without, and in many cases are now doing without. So it calls for a recalibration of worth and value in society, and we'll be at the forefront of proselytizing that. We live in a world, to coin a phrase, where some people, the most important people, know the price of everything and the value of nothing. We know what the value of the workers at the lower end of the pay scale and the lower end of the public relations scale truly is, and we won't miss that point.
Yeah, thanks very much, George. I mean, I'd say we have, we have made efforts to make these points. It's not as if the Workers' Party has been silent on these matters over the last year. But as in the context of what we've got to get across, obviously we understand that we've got to be, constantly bettering our ability to do this, and actually, making the material that we make, the things that we do make pronouncements on, go further and reach, the ears of more workers in Britain. Also, on that point about the far right and the seducing of workers into those extreme far right ideologies, I'd say that the best recruiting for that is your kind of left liberal kind of outlook that seeks to convince people that you can just tinker with this bit and that bit and have a nice kind of kinder type of capitalism. Those arguments don't make any sense to people, especially people really at the sharp end of things, because often the examples that people will be given just really don't apply to them. So I'd say the fact that we are in a position where we can put an alternative to that, we can actually say that we genuinely stand for socialism as something apart from and distinctly different to capitalism. When we talk about socialism, we're not just talking about a kind of welfare state capitalism that we used to have here. We do think that we want something better and more far-reaching than that, and something that can be really raise the opportunities and the life quality for people. So yeah, I think as we're in a position where we can put a counter argument across, and we can actually explain and demonstrate to people why is the situation deteriorating in this way. Why is it that workers here are feeling more and more the sharp end of the stick, You know, that sort of capitalist apology type of left liberalism just doesn't cut it with that. So, you know, we do have the ability to make these points ourselves and really win people over. I'm going to come to Claire next. If you can unmute yourself, Claire.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Nice to hear you.
I don't have anything original to say, and I don't really have any detail. What I've been so impressed by tonight is the level of detail, really specific cases of what the Workers' Party wants to do, and exactly how working people are struggling at the moment. I was just mindful of something that Jyoti said in our previous meetings, that it's almost embarrassing how little working people request, demand, strive for. We've been, and I mean everyone who works now, when I say working class, everyone who works, that includes, you know, professionals and lower paid workers, because we are all working class, aren't we? We don't rule anything. And we just, you know, we just put up with it, don't we? And I do think, though, that that's coming towards an end. And I genuinely do think that's coming towards an end, because those in power are ramping up their attacks. They're more open and blatant with, as you've mentioned, George, corruption. You know, when I was young, that kind of thing was hidden. People still respected their elders, the church, and those in power. It's gone. The genie's out the bottle. Thank God, actually. It's gone forever. So it's a good time. It's painful, but as one door closes, another one opens. It's just hell in the hallway. And I'd like to think that we're in the hallway, and we have to be there. Obviously, when the COVID thing has passed, we have to be there physically. And at the moment, we're doing our best, aren't we? We're getting the message out there. So, I don't buy the far right thing either. I just feel optimistic most times. They're not the people I meet. They're not the people I bump into. They're not the people I've ever bumped into. So, you know, and I think that's a great way of looking down on working people and categorizing working people. It's just incredibly dismissive. And I think I just wanted to say that I do think we're onto a winner with social media. And I say that a lot, even though I'm absolutely rubbish at it, really. But I do think we're onto something strong there. We must be. Otherwise, Jack Dorsey and his lot wouldn't be banning people. They wouldn't be cancelling people left, right, and centre. There wouldn't be the explosion, should we say, of identity politics in all its nihilism, narcissism, and darkness. It's there to distract. So if they've got to shut you up or promote what you're saying, it's because it has an influence. And that's us. We should have an influence the way we're going. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Bravo, Claire. Bravo. And you're far from bad at social media, I should say. And you are an exemplar of what a spokesperson for the Workers' Party and for the working class should be. And one of the main strengths in your game is, as a woman, calling out the nonsense which is thrown scattered like red herrings across the public square. Even Joe Biden, in his, I think, last interview before assuming the presidency, was on television declaring that any male prisoner in the United States that declares themselves to be a female will be put into a female prison, a policy which may have to be reviewed in 9 months. The madness of identity politics is literally scattered across the public square like a million red herrings. And I alluded to it earlier in the Kamala Harris thing. I mean, I can no longer look at the news because it is being sold to us as some kind of breakthrough. that a prosecutor, a social and political climber who didn't get 1% of the vote in the Democratic Party's primary is now on the threshold of the presidency of the United States. And we're supposed to welcome that because of her color and because of her gender. I won't. And most ordinary people, men and women, are too smart to fall for these red herrings. But the people who control the media, the liberal classes who write the news, who speak the news, who frame the news, these people are portraying this as some kind of red letter day. And we know that very soon and quickly it will become obvious, just as it did with Mrs. Thatcher, that it puts no extra potato on your plate. It saves not one job, stops not one war, prevents one crime, that the person in power is this color or that, or this gender or that. What counts is what they stand for, what they're going to do. And this common sense socialism that we stand for will, I believe, you're right, these are the worst of times, but they can become, in the bounce back, they can become the best of times, because I hope that a lot of people see things much more clearly now than they did before 12 months ago.
Thanks very much, George. And yeah, excellent points made there, Claire. I'm just going to come to Robert, if you'd like to unmute, and then it will be almost time to close the meeting down, okay? You there, Robert? Okay, I'm not getting anything through from Robert there, but I do have a message that was sent in from one of our members in South Wales, and she's got a nice message detailing why she joined the party and what she hopes for. Sam says, I joined the Workers' Party because I believe that there is a better future for this country and that the working class deserve that better future. I reject the Malthusian attitudes of eco-activists who believe humanity is not worth saving, and I reject the liberal ideologies that breed contempt for the working class of Britain, labelling us as unsavable and unworthy of having a say in our future and our future generations. The Workers' Party has given me hope in the journey of empowering the working class of Britain, and I believe it is the vehicle by which to propel the socialist movement of Britain forward. Mental health issues are growing day by day in the current conditions because it is hard for many people to say a way forward or a reason to go on. But I believe that socialism is the ray of hope for the workers of Britain that can raise people out of the postmodernist way of thinking that we are fed by the mainstream media, that nothing will ever change. Things will change, and we, the working class, will be the ones driving that change. And us, together at the Workers' Party of Britain, will be the force to do so.
Well, what a beautiful message, Sam, and a fitting one to end the meeting on. It is the choice, as it was 100 years ago. It's socialism or the barbarism that we see all around us and which could get worse, and in the past has been worse. The propensity of capitalism to exploit, to invade, to occupy, to create strife and war and hate is obvious, and socialism is its alternative. The rest has been tried and failed. Social democracy is no more. It's very interesting how Rob put it earlier, that he said the welfare state capitalism that we used to have here. And of course, he's right. We have to acknowledge and recognize that that welfare state capitalism is no more, and it is no more because capitalism thought that it no longer required it as a palliative for the working class, to stop them asking, in Claire's words, for more than an embarrassingly little amount of the cake. It's our job to encourage the working class not only to demand the whole cake, but to demand the whole bakery and everything involved in the making and delivering of that cake, including a fair share of the eating of it. That's our perspective, and that is qualitatively, fundamentally different from the merchants of a return to a shrunken form of welfare state capitalism, because that's what the Labour front bench is now demanding. They are demanding only a return to a meager sliver of even the meager sliver that welfare state capitalism used to be. They are active participants in moving the center of political gravity towards the right by agreeing and conceding at every turn. They are a poor excuse for an opposition. Keith Starmer ain't no Keir Hardie. That's absolutely clear, I think, to everyone, overwhelmingly amongst the working class and amongst all classes, actually. Having told us that he'd be 20 points ahead, he'll soon be a dozen points behind. So we stand for something completely different. We believe our arguments have power and traction, and we'll go on making them as well as professionally and as tirelessly as we possibly can in these circumstances and in the new circumstances that will arise after this is over. Now, next week we have, Rob, a wonderful public meeting to mark the anniversary of the conflict which still rages in Yemen. It's an international day in solidarity with the people of Yemen. I urge everyone to bring others to that meeting to get the maximum audience that we can for that meeting. We are being joined by top-line speakers from around the world, from the United States, Britain, and elsewhere, and including, of course, people from the region itself. It's going to be a cracking meeting. I'll introduce it, or Jyoti's introducing it. I'll give a short statement, but the guest speakers are a terrific array of interesting talent. So please spread the word that next week's meeting on the Yemen is a must-see, and I think we can do our party a lot of good. They say we're little Englanders, you see, even though I'm in Scotland and have never been an Englander of any kind. They say we're too economistic, we're too interested in trade union affairs and so on. I wish they were a bit more interested in trade union affairs, and that includes the trade unions. But it isn't true, you see. We are internationalists, but we're proud to be the Workers' Party of Britain. Thanks very much indeed for watching.
Thanks very much, George. Thanks for joining us, everyone.